Hey, friends, coming up, we talk about the pillars of widowhood, two of them being emotional health and financial health, the necessity of preemptive conversations regarding widowhood during your marriage, the three words to ask a widow in grief, how widowhood is death, but it can also be a rebirth that allows you to extend the legacy of love. With the average age of widows in the United States being 59 years young and the average age of widows in the world being 39, this is an important episode. I hope you stay tuned. What up, Heal Squad? Welcome back. Glad to be with you today. Hope you're doing well wherever in this crazy, beautiful world you are. We have a really great two-parter starting today with Carolyn Moor, who I met a few months ago at a financial health event. I call it financial health, but it was a women in finance event. And she had a really interesting organization that she started called Modern Widows Club. And when she started telling me about widows and the plight of widows, I said, wait, I've never heard this before. We need to do an episode. So that's what we're doing today. But first, our quote of the day: you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And that is from Maya Angelou, friends. Like I said, Carolyn Moor is the guest today. She's the visionary behind the Modern Widows Club, which is a public nonprofit that uplifts widows and their families. She's a TEDx speaker and author. Carolyn has propelled the Modern Widows Club into an indispensable global haven, providing support, education, research, and advocacy for widowed women worldwide. Carolyn sparked a movement that encourages widows to turn their grief into growth and to advocate for better widow care, while leading a cultural revolution on how widowhood is actually perceived and experienced. And I'm really, really excited for you guys to hear this conversation. Whether you are a widow, you know a widow, or not, there are things you need to know before anything like that happens. We're going to talk about the health crisis that widows around the world are facing and the work she's doing to help mitigate this issue with her Modern Widows Club, and raising awareness for this issue and for those tough conversations that need to be had. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy part one of my interview with Carolyn. I had no
Yeah.
idea that the Modern Widows Club even existed. I didn't
Mhm.
think about that. It's definitely not something we think about. So that's why I was like, wait, we should do an episode together talking about this because
Yeah.
there's so much probably to learn.
Yeah, I certainly have learned a lot just in that one area of what we call the pillars of healthy widowhood. The first two is emotional, mental health, and financial health. That is exactly the space in which new widows live in because you're literally in appointments with your financial advisor, your estate attorney, and your accountant first thing as soon as you leave, the funeral home
No
and
way.
deciding what you want to do with that. There's so much that I have learned just, looking back at my own personal experience, but then broaden kind of getting on the balcony and then looking at the broad landscape of being honored to hear the stories of tens of thousands of widows and really uh, summarizing what's happening around the world. And financial stability is in crisis for women worldwide in widowhood. And so that's why we interject ourselves into conferences like that, because if we can't train the financial advisors about this, then and the financial industry, how are we going to really make an impact? Because not everyone ends up on the side where they're financially stable. And in
Yeah.
fact, quite the contrary. Widowhood is a ticket to poverty for women worldwide and in this
Oh,
country and around the world. So that's why we need to go into those spaces and educate and make sure even their own clients have our resource so that they become better clients, right? And they
yeah.
don't become counselors to their widows, which a lot of the times happens. Yeah.
So fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
my husband is sitting in right now, and his mom was widowed when his dad died. And of course, my dad lost my mom. But,
Mm.
um, with my dad, we've always taken care of our parents. So he didn't have to worry about all of those things. But your mom, I mean, your mom had you, honey. So maybe she didn't have to worry about it either.
she was blessed to have a husband, a partner who was very much thinking of that always. I got to
Mhm.
leave you good. I got to leave you good. I got to leave. And even when he was going dying, and she's like, "You're not dying." He was like, "I left you good, Kathy. You're fine."
Well, he even helped her meet her new partner.
Yeah,
He even made sure she had a partner when he
was like
left.
all over it.
Right?
And then I have another.
That's a great husband and the importance of preemptive conversations in relationships.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what we hope for, right?
yeah. So rather than be reactive, it's being proactive. Do you have advice on how you go about a preemptive conversation regarding that?
Oh, I'm sure.
I'd love to hear from her.
Well, absolutely. This is a part of the education and advocacy that Model Widows Club does. In fact, in a lot of places of worship, we challenge why they're not talking about widowhood as part of marriage courses and classes that they provide, because that is what happens when one of you is no longer here. It's a very important conversation. I think at men's events, it's very important to talk about what's going to happen, because a lot of men won't talk to their wives about life insurance or understanding the finances. This is what we hear from the widows who did not have any planning done. They could not get their spouse to have the discussion. So, really going kind of before widowhood and talking about how can we lessen the suffering of the one left behind. What does even that process look like? So I'm so happy to hear that, Kevin, and you, Maria, because that is our hope, is that not only are we creating a platform and a space for women to heal and find hope and to grow, they can do it much easier when those conversations have taken place. Mine is I was 30. I'm in my 60s now, but I was 37 when I became widowed, and my husband and I had gotten life insurance 4 months prior to that and bought Keyman life insurance. And I knew he was an organ donor, but it was only because Payne Stewart, the golfer who was from Orlando, um, passed away in flight. Four widows were created when his plane went down. And when that happened, um, I was flying in clients' private jets. I was an interior designer. He was an interior architect. We were flying in the same jet that actually went down. And when that happened, I refused to get on a flight with him because we had 2 and 4-year-old daughters at home and a 50-person interior design firm. So, talk about a sign. And then, unfortunately, we were in a horrible hit and run car accident.
Oh,
But that was 4 months before we prepared for that moment. Very rare, very fortunate, such a God thing that happened in that sequence. But
because you
yeah, the
had
preemptive
babies.
conversations are a big part of what we advocate for.
I had another friend, Susan Maria. You know Susan, and her husband was a college friend of mine who passed away, I believe, at 30. He got up in the middle of the night with one of the babies and literally had a heart attack and died. But he was someone who had a very old soul. He was always the one that was more responsible than the rest of us. He wasn't, the typical frat guy, and he put all that stuff in place, health insurance. He like had everything to the nines, and it was sudden. He didn't expect it. No one expected him to die, but he had everything in place, and that's why she's been blessed up till now, because he did take those protocols. Do you have advice about health insurance, about life insurance, and different
Well,
kinds?
it's yes. I mean, only 50% of Americans have it. They don't see
Really?
it as a priority. And, things like GoFundMe, those platforms, the number one reason why they exist is people literally cannot afford to bury the person that they love.
Yeah.
They most of the time put it on a credit card, and then they're in debt, you know, just to get a loved one's end of life taken care of. So we do need to, I've spent a lot of years attempting to get into men's events to talk about this, because I think that reaching men and easing their any kind of fears they may have about doing this, to give them permission to have these really important conversations. Because the reality is, I'm a little bit of a statistic geek, and it's really helped me a lot during this time, is that from the age of 40 to 85, the percentage of widows, female population of widows, goes from 1% at age 40 to 73% at age 85. So this is I was 37, your friend was 30. Okay, we brought, that we weren't even 1% of the female population. But the average age of a widow in this country is 59. Globally, in third world countries, it's 39. So we're talking about the stages of a woman's life, and I like to think of them as in decades, because when I was in my 30s, I had different needs than I am in my 60s now.
Crazy
Right?
that you're in your
What
60s, by the way, because you look like you're in your
Yeah,
30s.
you don't look like
Side
that.
note.
Thank you.
I can't let you say it again without telling you.
Thank you. Thank you. And you know what? A big part of that is because a lot of the things you talk about, what does real health look like? But I will tell you, I wasn't very healthy in early widowhood, and it was because of a lack of support. And I'll tell you, Kevin, I'm really honest about the reality of the experience of becoming widowed so young. We only had $250,000 worth of life insurance because we were young.
Right. And you think that's a fortune, and it's not for a life. No, I know. It's
And
not.
then, my daughters were 2 and 4. So my daughters are 26 and 28 now. So you think about $250,000. Well, I went from $150,000 household income to zero for 2 years. So you can see how long that will last. So there is some important conversations to have. Luckily, we also had Keyman Life Insurance, so we were able to find a new president for our company. And
What
that
is
survived.
Keyman's life insurance? What is that?
Keyman Life Insurance is for your business. If you are the key person that is like in a president role, and you would need to be replaced. And so that money goes towards stabilizing the business in the absence of the key person.
I don't know if I have that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, note that, Dwayne in the
Yeah.
booth. Kevin needs, and Maria needs
Yeah.
Keyman. Can we go over, the difference between term life and I know there's different kinds of life insurances. I'm a big believer in them and I'm so glad you said that, because the 250 you're not thinking on the 40 or 50 year plan of life with that.
Well,
So
also, it's like one of those things in your budget of items, like your line items, where people are like, yeah, we don't need to deal with this yet. And people don't spend the money on it, but it is so important. I'm always trying to tell people to get all the insurances you can, because when something happens, you really need it. The one thing I'll add to Kevin's question is, have they changed since COVID? Because my thing is, everyone should be reaching for this insurance now because of COVID, because those statistics you just gave us are probably way worse because people are dropping dead like flies after
You're
these
right.
vaccines and getting COVID.
You're right. And I would really love to find those statistics, and have been unable to. And I have an army of advocates really kind of worldwide that are constantly looking for them. I cannot find them. And there's a whole thing about COVID widows too. This is the first time in history. We started our organization in 2011, just 2 ladies in my home, and now have grown to like 50,000, women worldwide.
Wow.
And COVID was a completely, we, of course, like everyone, went virtual, but we were already a virtual organization. And so it was an easier transition for us. However, what I didn't know is I had to start learning from COVID widows, because I'd never heard stories where people's cause of death was invalidated. And, it's if someone passes away from suicide or homicide or car vehicle accident or cancer or heart disease, it's validated. It's a valid diagnosis. But COVID widows have always struggled with people telling them it's not a true diagnosis for their spouse's loss. And so that ends up being a secondary loss because now people don't even believe that their spouse died from COVID. And it makes it so complex and it prolongs their grief.
What were
So
they
that's
like? So the spouse thought they died of something else, but they attributed it to COVID?
Well, the death certificate is whatever's on the death certificate
Yeah.
is what stands. And then some people didn't want COVID-19 to be the diagnosis. They wanted it because eventually it's a public document. And that's a whole another thing that widows have taught me, have given me my PhD in uncommon knowledge of this, listening to these women and saying, if my husband passed away from suicide, I don't want, for my children's sake, I don't want that public knowledge for someone else to find and before I can have a conversation with my children at a certain age. There are so many what I would call social injustices that happen for widows that is really kind of what I have mushroomed up to, is becoming
Wow.
this voice and this platform for a lack of dignity in what widows experience, not just in this country, but around the world, where it is a absolute human rights violation in what so much happens for them, health related. In this country, we don't even study widows under the umbrella of women's health. We don't have a widowhood caucus in DC. We don't have an arm of widowhood even talking about widowhood in the women's caucus. They're invisible. The reason why you haven't heard of Modern Widows Club
Yeah.
is because no one's heard of anything to do with widows, because it's not mainstream conversations, even after a pandemic, which we thought would really broaden the ability to have the conversation, but we have not seen evidence of that.
Yeah.
Male widows, do you deal with them as well?
Widowers, right now, we actually refer to widower organizations. We did a pilot project with men. A big part is finding the right volunteer leaders. And so we had excellent 2 widowers remarried in 2 different states, different
Oh.
stories.
So
One
you
was
guys are
younger.
matchmaking too?
Oh, well, if we actually did that, we probably would not have to fundraise very much, especially with the Golden Bachelor and the Golden Bachelorette being so popular now. But our women, I will tell you, they don't want men in group because they need to be vulnerable and they need to be transparent. And they feel very different when the men are there.
Yeah.
So we did a pilot project with the widowers, but you know what? The guys didn't show up.
No, they don't, because they got it. Like the guy thinks like, no, I got this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's that arrogance of male we have, where it's like, no, I got it. And, maybe financially, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but emotionally they don't.
Mm-hmm. And statistically, men remarry much sooner than widows. And so the U.S. Census Bureau, men remarry somewhere between 1 to 3 years after widowhood, and women 6 to 7 years. And so the socializing is a kind of a different attitude, and women want to heal and men want to repartner. And that's what we see, and that's wonderful, right? We do have socials where we invite anyone to come, and some of the widowers do, and some single guys come, because our ladies, we actually have a dating support club at Modern Widows Club, and so we teach our ladies how to create their new identity and know what they're offering for love again.
I love that.
Teach them, we teach them how to do background checks. We teach them how to do dating profiles. We walk through the first date with them. They get to come back and get feedback and insight. And that's what widow support looks like to us, right? The real practical, how do I rebuild a new identity now that the death of my relationship is gone.
Yeah.
And I loved your interview with Elizabeth Gilbert, because she talks about, why do women have to be near death to create change?
Mm-hmm.
Widowhood is a little death. It is the death of the person that you were with that person and all the dreams that you had for each other. And so it is a rebirth. Widowhood, this is how we see it. And it's an opportunity for them to extend the legacy of love that has already been created. And, not all marriages were, amazing, but some are. And either way, women want to be able to rebuild a new identity, pass on the legacy of love that they felt in that relationship and what it can become in the future. I always say widows are women of fulfilled marriage vows, promise made, promise kept, promise honored. We must allow women and men to honor that relationship instead of just moving on and they're never going to forget about it. It's a part of who they are today.
Yeah. So, Carolyn, you started this in 2011. How long after your husband's loss was that?
As of today?
No, like you were working, you had your
Oh,
company, but
yes. Well,
how soon after?
yes. Well, it was 11 years, because our car accident was actually on Valentine's Day.
Oh
We
my
were,
God.
yes. We were coming home from a very romantic dinner, and I hit a car full of four 20-year-old young men coming, probably partying from downtown, um, came into our lane and hit us and caused us to spin out of control. So, mine was very traumatic. It was severe head trauma for him. We had hit a light pole, and that light pole came and down and hit him in the car and missed me. So I had survivor's guilt. I had PTSD. I was in shock.
Oh my God.
I was running a 50-person interior design firm with him. I had 2 and 4-year-old daughters at home.
Oh my goodness.
And my entire life was destroyed. I did not know who I was. I was very suicidal. And so we did have a grief center in Orlando, Florida, where I was. And I went there for my daughters, hoping that eventually I would find support for myself. And what I really wanted, Maria, was role models.
Yeah.
I was such a career, very confident businesswoman. And I thought, well, there has to be, some formula here. There has to be a pathway. I have to go find the women who have done this, have parented, solo parented, and ran a business and grieved their best friend and their lover and the father of their children. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. And this was before, social media. This was in 2000. I went through September 11th
Oh,
with having a breakdown, because I knew now all these younger, women were becoming widowed. So my, it's been 24 years, but it took me, to be honest with you, I got picked to be on a reality show on TLC called Shalom in the Home in 2005. And my story got highly exposed in the media, and I got invited to be on the Oprah show in 2006. And they wanted me to come and be on the show called Troubled Families. And I said, no way. No way am I coming on a show called Troubled Families when I have fought so hard to not be a troubled family and to do as good as I possibly could with this experience. And they said, no, we want you to come on because you're an extraordinary woman. We saw your show on Shalom and Home, and you have every right to have just been crushed and give up and have no hope and, go a very unhealthy pathway to widowhood, but you chose to go a healthy way. and we want to use you as an example. And when that happened, I got what's called the Oprah effect, which you're probably familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
which is for 4 years, they re-aired that show. And for 4 years, I had people showing up at my home. I had people seeking me out at networking events. I had people writing me letters. I had a lot of marriage proposals.
Huh.
And when that happened, I did not want to do anything with widows. I couldn't handle the recognition of being that woman who lost her husband on Valentine's Day, and I need her to be my role model and my mentor when I needed mentors. And so when Oprah went off the air, I had made a promise to Oprah that I would do something good with this experience. And when I figured it out, I would make it happen. And so it took 11 years for me to invite 2 women, which I thought was all it was going to be, was mentoring 2 women. But then I learned a universal rule, which is widows know widows. For some reason, it's like infertility for you, women who, experience that, they find each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with widowhood. I became this antenna. And so anyone who became widowed, everyone in my neighborhood, everyone in my circle of friends just said, send them to Carolyn's house on the 3rd Thursday at 7:00, and she will open her door. And over 5,000 women showed up and walked across the threshold of my home in Orlando, Florida.
Wow.
And I just became that person. And it was just an extension of me wanting to reduce the suffering of one person
Mm-hmm.
by holding space with them and asking the 3 critical, the three words, and allowing women to be themselves in this experience. And that is, tell me more. Because too many people shut grieving people down
Mm-hmm.
in conversation. But I wasn't that way. I was like, tell me more. And I would sit and I would listen. And today, I don't even know how many thousands of stories I have heard, but now I understand so much more about just my own personal experience and us as a collective, that I have become a subject matter expert. So it really wasn't, there was no intention to start a nonprofit. I mean, I was very happy being an interior designer and I loved my career, but the calling on my life came very clearly, being on Oprah, then starting with 2 ladies, and the ladies never stopped coming, and then other ladies flying to Orlando and asking for me to teach them how to have a community in Seattle and Kansas City. And it was a series of me just saying, yes, I will be there for you. Yes, I will share what I know. And that's how it came to be.
Yeah.
I'd love to back up a little bit. When it all happened, it all got lopped on top of you.
Mhm.
I'd love to know, what you did at that time to pull yourself up, because it seems like it, when you're the first to do anything, it probably took you a longer and more painful process. And I feel like what you're doing now will streamline and reduce a lot of the pain and the time for these other women. However, I would love to know what were some of the choices you made? You were suicidal and you've got a business, you've got 2 little ones.
Yeah. How did you get past suicidal?
I mean, all of it. I just love to know what the process was, even if it was the 5-year process. I would love to know.
Well, thank you for asking. And I will tell you, a lot was extremely unhealthy in the beginning. I didn't realize that I wasn't eating. I wasn't fueling my body. At first, I refused to have alcohol in my house because I knew it'd be very easy to numb, but then I had these 2 little girls, and these 2 little girls would wake up every morning and look into my eyes, hopeful. And it was, if I had not had my 2 daughters, I can't imagine what it would be like, because my oldest daughter, Mackenzie, is an empath, and she would take her little 4-year-old hands to my face and go, "Mommy,
Oh,
it's going to be
oh
okay.
my God.
I can see Daddy. out the window. Can you leave it open? You know, Daddy's here with us. Very, fragile, spiritual.
Oh,
And, little things like, what do you mean Daddy's not coming home? His clothes are here. I would end up falling asleep from crying so hard after putting them to bed,
oh.
touching his clothes. These are the stories that we share. But what really, number one, was, first and foremost, I want to be an extraordinary parent. I'm going to honor everything that I loved about Chad. And I made a list of all the things he was so much better at than me. And I, one by one, decided to integrate those into my life. One of those was being playful. He was way more playful than me. I was so much more serious, about motherhood and business, and he could shut it off. I had to learn how to do those things. He he loved to play video games. He loved race cars. He was an artist. He loved to sketch. All of these things I started doing, and we would do anniversary visits. For instance, he loved his grandparents, and so on the anniversary, we call the angelversary at MWC, we would take flowers to someone we knew in our neighborhood who was widowed because she was a grandmother. So how I coped was really finding ways to honor what the gifts he gave me and the gifts now that I needed to integrate so that my daughters saw that in me as a combination as a parent. And so, and I did a lot of reading, whatever I could get my hands on. This was kind of before a bunch of workshops and
And and there's so much information today available that right then I know 20 something years ago. Do you remember any of the books, the titles that you read? Because some of them are timeless.
Some of them are, and I don't remember. And I tell you why, is because I absolutely have no memory of the first year.
Yeah.
I don't have any memory of my daughters being 2 and 4 years old.
Okay.
So that was something I didn't quite understand until later when we did research on widows and we found that they have brain fog for a minimum of 2 years. And so here I'm making all these decisions and trying to integrate all of these resources, but I'm in brain fog. I'm in a cognitive disadvantage. But I didn't understand any of that. Now we bring that information.
Now with awareness.
But that's why planning is so important, because you have to plan for that brain fog.
I think maybe in part 2, Marie, we're going to get into the plan. But
I want to go later. I want to go through all the specifics of everything.
I love the process that you went through, and crying with his clothing. I mean, that was probably cathartic as much as it's painful.
So important.
Right?
So
I did that with my dogs. I can only imagine.
You can still
I just washed my dog's sweatshirt when I put him to sleep just now it was right when we got married. It was 2017. I just washed it.
The smell of the right. You remember I remember my dad's smell, and it doesn't last forever. I know that after so many months that their scent goes away. It's just whatever human. It's just chemistry. But to me, like that meant a lot. So the crying to sleep, that probably helped you for processing.
It did. And, even when it took me probably 2.5 years to move his clothes.
Okay.
And some people do it right away. But for me, even when I went to move them, I took photos of where everything was in case afterwards I could put it back.
Yeah.
That's how a grieving brain does not function the same as when you're not grieving. Who would take a photo of closet to put it back once they've taken it down? I look at that now and just go, "Wow, that was my way of thinking."
Your brain was hurt.
And there's probably no right or wrong for
No.
You're the person who gets rid of the clothes immediately versus the one that
Right.
waits 3 years, right? There's no
Yep. Nope.
It's also like all deaths are different.
Yes.
Like accidents are way different than like my mom dying of cancer and
yeah.
having that
Hmm.
slow death.
I feel like the
You
slow death is
prepare,
yeah, you can
you
prepare.
mourn along the way. Like I was mourning my mom years before
Right.
she died. So there
Right.
is different, like my cousin was killed in a tragic car crash. So I
Mm.
understand a little bit of that feeling because we were super close. I was 15 and he was 18 at the time. And
It took, I mean,
oh my God,
double that, 2 decades.
over 2 decades.
I think the trauma takes longer. I remember my mom because it was like a 5-year journey with my dad, and I remember her saying, she's like, I'm cried out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had mourned so much that thank God, like she picked right up and met her life partner, who she's still with now,
Hmm.
30 years
Hmm.
later. I don't know, but 6 months
But
later.
they're all
But she
different.
said, Kevin, because I got it. Like she had 5 years of crying and crying and crying. So it is
Hmm.
definitely when it's sudden. My hat goes off to anybody when it's
It really is. The question is, what makes me feel alive? What makes me feel alive? This is the question when I mentor widows. I have to get to the bottom. At first, we have to talk about first thing I talk to them about is how are they sleeping? Because if I can't help them solve the reason why they can't sleep, they're not going to have the energy to even do the work
right.
in
Yeah.
widowhood,
Oh my
right?
goodness, yeah.
Then we have to say, what makes you feel alive? For your mom, it was a long letting go of your dad. It was time for her to find new life. And for me, that was, buying a sports car, traveling,
Good.
eventually
Yeah.
dating. Nothing filled me up more than giving back.
I love that.
So
Well,
that's
we have
what
to
you
take a quick break because I have to mention the people that keep us
Oh,
going
yes, the
and allow
Macy's
us.
jacket I have on.
Are you wearing Macy's right now?
I love
Yes,
I
it.
I
freaking
am,
love
of
you,
course.
Carolyn.
Oh, Carolyn's amazing.
I love the color, by the way. Is that like a mustard
No.
yellow?
Yes.
I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's a DKNY. I love it. I just got it too.
Very
So,
nice. Well, you might like some of my things that I've chosen on my wish list. But summer's here, friends. And I don't know about you guys, but I am gearing up for some summer vacation plans. I know we always plan ours late in the game. Most people have theirs well in advance. I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to Greece like next week. So I am scouring to find all of the things that I would like for my vacation because sometimes you just want that new bikini or sometimes you need a new cover up, which by the way, I have a really cute set from Trina Turk on there that I love and I just put on my Instagram. So regardless of what you have going on, whether it's a vacation, a family reunion, or some event coming up, check out my wish list using the link in the podcast description. Let me know what you guys end up with. And thank you guys for always supporting us through Macy's because they support us. So when you buy anything through our link, that supports the show. So thank you for that. And Way hair care products. I used my leave-in conditioner today with my diffuser. I let my hair go naturally curly, which by the way, Athena is going to have curly hair too. Naturally curly hair because her little hair is coming in and it's coming in curly. But my go-to favorite products that they have are the leave-in conditioner and the hair oil. I don't know if you've ever tried it, Carolyn, before, but
I
I
haven't.
highly recommend the oil I use on the wet tips of my hair, and it just makes everything so nice. I always say my mom would have been so happy because she used to say, Maria, my hair is very dry. And I would buy her all these products and she would have really loved Way products. So guys, if you're eager to elevate your hair care routine, try some Way products. Head over to theway.com, theuai.com. Use the promo code Heal Squad and you'll get 15% off. So go check it out. And if you're not sure what products you want to try for your hair type or what will work best, if you go to their website, you can take a hair care quiz and find out. So theway.com. Okay, Carolyn, I have another question because we were just talking about how grief is different. I think grief is different for everybody. And I always say you can never judge what people do. And Kev, I think that was a really great point you brought up about whether you take the clothes out 2 years or 2 days, like I cleaned out all of my mom's stuff immediately. I've always been an immediate person, whether it's when I come home from my trip, I unpack immediately, even if it's 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
When our dogs have passed on, I've either pre cleaned or clean right away. I need to
But we also did it for another reason.
go ahead.
It was your dad. And we know her dad, we didn't, he wanted to see her remains and yet really didn't. And we shielded him from it. Her dad is 80 and vibrant and works 18 hours a day. So anyone who thinks that whatever we did was dysfunctional no. We both know your dad, and I knew if he had to see this every day, it would be so heavy on him. It was already heavy enough in his heart. So what we wanted to do was move forward as quickly as we could. And, he still grieves. We did biofeedback with him, and I don't know if you believe in that, but the one thing that came back with him emotionally was that, and this is 3 years later, is that he's heartbroken. He's lost, because he doesn't have his significant other, but he gets up and he plays his Greek music and he gardens and he fixes and he builds. But we had also done it for that reason to Maria.
No, it was for all of us. Like, listen, it's not like we're erasing photos. Photos are there, but the remnants of illness, I didn't want to see anymore. And I didn't want him to see that. But, when you're in a tragic situation like that, there's no way to prepare for that. And I just, I wonder if you think back to that day, were those kids, were they inebriated?
My daughters had no concept of death.
No, the boys that were driving the other car.
Oh,
Were they
Yeah, I
drunk?
wanted to ask, did they get away with it? It was hit and run
yes. Yes, they did. There are 4 40-year-old men
somewhere
right
in the
now
world.
who know that accident was caused. They left the scene.
Oh,
This
wow.
was before we had cameras on phones. This was in 2000. So there was a witness. They did not find the black Mustang. I saw them come up. We were in a convertible. And so I could have identified them if they would have found them. So I did hire an attorney. And the insurance company did give me my uninsured motorist claim because they actually couldn't prove that, because there was a witness, they couldn't prove the vehicle had insurance. So talk about another insurance conversation.
Wow.
Having uninsured motorist insurance on your car saves you in that case as well. I was very fortunate to find an attorney who didn't not take any fee for it, and just as a extension of grace, just wrote the insurance company. I would not have known to do that. There could be a whole conversation about insurance and around, loss of life, because even I had to have disability insurance the entire time I was raising my daughters, and it was expensive because if I was the only wage earner in my household and I became disabled, what would become of my family?
Yeah.
So there's so many different things to talk about.
But there's a lot of grief around not having closure with that too, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is where spirituality comes in. At some point, I did have to say, that's in God's hands. Like, I'm not going to spend the limited energy and time that I have to spend with my grieving daughters and my own grief to heal. I'm not putting energy towards that. And I will leave that to another time, maybe someone will come back and they'll remember that and they'll search for it because it'll be public record. And they'll find out that someone died in that. I know that they know that someone died because I was a first responder, and in my 20s, I was a nurse. And so I understood triage. I understood what happens when you're a first responder. And so I was having to give him CPR and make sure his spinal cord was aligned. And so that was part of the trauma that I experienced, because in that moment, I wasn't that wife and that person on that romantic dinner coming home. I was the first responder.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of repressed trauma that came out about 9 months later, where
Oh,
I started having panic attacks. And I had never had a panic attack, so I didn't understand how the body takes over, and the rapid heart rate and the sweating and the sound of sirens, and to see a police car or any kind of service vehicle like an ambulance caused me to go into a panic attack. And so when Kevin asked me what did I do the first year, doctors didn't identify that I needed to be treated for this. That, like, I left the hospital in bloody clothes to take off at my own home. I had to sneak in and go upstairs and take those
oh,
clothes off, and I put them in a pillowcase, and then I stuck them, somewhere that ended up being in a memory box somewhere. And on Shalom in the Home, when I was on that show on TLC, they we did a burial of those bloody clothes that I had had for 6 years. And what was I going to do with them? I don't know. What did Jackie O do with her clothes? When this happens and you're not in your right state of mind. And so
wow.
one of the things, Kevin, that I did do, now that I'm remembering, you've like triggered this memory, because you talking about what you did with your dad was, in reality, what you were doing is creating peace for him. You were creating peace, and you were changing his space so that he could see a new future for
Yes,
himself.
that was so important for us. We wanted him to know there was a
Right.
future, there were things to look
Correct.
forward to. And Kevin was
Oh,
really adamant about, like,
yeah.
Costa, there is life after this. And he was already preparing him before
Yeah.
my mom had passed. We were redoing the house. We were just things we could fix ourselves, just, new molding, new this, new that,
Yeah.
making it fresh and different. But also he kept saying, there's life after this, Costa. You're gonna see.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, 100%.
So one of the things I did was I actually created a beautiful garden in my backyard. And that became my therapy. Now that I'm remembering back, oh my gosh, it seems so long ago, but I remember very clearly writing in my journal, which I highly recommend that people journal during transitional times in their life. And I wrote, if I'm going to live in this much pain, at least I can do it in a beautiful garden.
Whoa.
Because I didn't know how to get through the pain, but I knew that a beautiful garden would help me see the simple things. And one of the podcasts that you did on the real luxuries of life,
Mm.
I can't touch Chad's hair anymore. This is something I want to do, but I can dig in the earth and I can create something new. And it was very much, I intuitively knew that I was blossoming, and I needed to see other things around me that were blossoming. I didn't know that my life, that I had experienced a spiritual death. Widowhood is a detachment from something you chose to attach to.
Ooh.
Yeah. There's no choice in the matter. It's chosen for you. And what you do after that, who is nearest to you, who you see as inspiration, is extremely important. I couldn't find that. So this is why I started building a garden, which included a pink grapefruit tree, which ended up being where I buried the clothes on that TV show. So I had created this beautiful garden of fruits and flowers, and I spent a long time in nature, and nature became a very healing catharsis for me.
I think
So thank
all
you
of the
for
yeah. Sorry, continue.
intuitively, what I now know is intuitively, we all, just like Elizabeth Gilbert says, death knocks at your door. It has much to teach you. And I didn't know that at that time, but of course now I really understand the wisdom of that. And some of the thing I know you had been talking about, you were cosmic Kev, right? Like, I don't know what in depth that was, but I had a I had a friend who was a shaman, and she did my numerology, and she said, Carolyn, you're a 22 and Chad is an 11. The two of you came here to actually create something that never existed before that's going to heal the world.
Oh,
Yeah. And so Chad had to die in order for me to become the woman doing what I'm doing today.
Do you see with other widows the same thing where the partner had to go to bring in something new and special?
I see widowhood it is chosen for you. And I see that a lot with widows. Finding purpose and meaning is ultimately everything we do at Modern Widows Club is inching them closer to what is the purpose and meaning for your life in general. How did this love contribute to finding what that is? Because when the pandemic was very isolating for all of us, but the pandemic was a little tiny experience of what it's like to be widowed. No control. You've got so much solo time. You want to do things, but you can't. It's a very uncontrollable situation that you have to develop patience. And in that, we create great resilience. One of the really good things because I couldn't find role models, you know what I did? I started signing up for all the Ivy League newsletters. And I wanted to know what they were researching around resilience and wisdom science. And I wanted to understand, how do people flourish? Because people have suffered in many situations. Widowhood just happens to be the number one most stressful life event, according to this Holmes and Ray social readjustment scale. They gauge like what a life event and what the stress points are. Widowhood is the only one that's 100 stress points. Divorce is 72. Having a child is 39. They put a stress like number. The problem in widowhood is caregivers. Caregivers are stressed out. They're watching their loved one die.
mm-hmm.
They're already, at such a high stress point, but the moment that person dies, they just add 100 points onto the problem with that is when you get near 300 stress points in anyone's life, but especially in widowhood, because you're given that 100 points, you have an 80% chance of being diagnosed with a stress-induced health breakdown.
Yep.
And that when I learned that, I just went, why is widowhood not being addressed as a women's health issue and not just a grief issue?
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I just look back to our 5 years of taking care of my mom, and I
Mm-hmm.
had a husband that was so supportive and would send me off to get breaks, but I was so intertwined in her every movement, in her every medication, in her every care moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a long time, and I was giving her everything I had, because I was determined for her to survive this and beat this and not get the 6 to 12 months that everybody else gets with brain cancer. So it was
You were
a lot,
palliative
and
care
it's
for her.
kind of no
Yeah.
coincidence that COVID vaccines definitely. Oh, my earbud just disconnected from my thing. Stand by. But it's no coincidence that, yes, coupled with vaccines and getting COVID, it went to weak parts of my body. But
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
know it's no coincidence that I got very sick. And
Well, and you were talking about the way, alopecia. When I really started talking to women, I started seeing really what those health breakdowns look like. Alopecia, huge. We talk about healthcare, hair care products all the time in our groups, because alopecia is, losing your hair. It's stress related.
yeah,
And yet, for some reason, when I became widowed, I went to my GYN OB because just for my normal woman checkup. But there's no protocol for when someone becomes widowed to assess them and to see what they need. And this is what needs to change in the medical. The research around widowhood needs to not just start at 65. It needs to address all ages of it happening to women, because that's when it is happening.
Yeah. Well, you talk about their
There's no
help.
crisis center anywhere for widowhood worldwide.
And,
And why is that?
and
Why couldn't
Carolyn,
I walk into a center and get all the resources I needed in one place instead of spending years looking for all these resources?
Yeah.
and I think today 65 is much more like 45. So even if
Right.
it is 65, you are far more vibrant at 65 today. In the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, 65, you're going to have to keep working because of how the economy
Yeah.
is. But I think that's healthier for you anyway. But yeah, a 65-year-old today is a 40, 45-year-old, and to pick up the pieces then. Anyway, yeah.
So you talk about the health crisis affecting female widows. And so you talked about the point system. So what else do we not know? And you're talking about alopecia. I'm sure there's so many autoimmune conditions that you see,
Yes.
right? Because stress
Yep.
is where all of this kind of comes from.
Right. Um, you were talking about the heartbreak. That is a real diagnosis, broken heart syndrome.
Mm.
They're not doing any research on people who lose a spouse and are susceptible to broken heart syndrome. It is a real diagnosis. We have widows in our organization who had heart attacks in the hospital when their spouses passed away.
Oh,
We learn a lot when we listen to widows. We learn a lot from police, first responder widows, people coming to their house and announcing that their
mhm.
spouse has died, and then they just leave.
Yeah.
They leave her alone. And this is not a good process. Every process that happens, everyone who goes to a funeral home should walk away with resources for that's relevant for them. What I realized was is with greater knowledge and greater information like this podcast shares, less suffering and closer to making confident decisions about their health. Maria, our research shows that a large majority of widows have no interest in their health. They have no interest in their future because they're overwhelmed, they're depressed, they're isolated, and they're lonely. This is a formula for a very negative health response. And what our organization does is we bring connection and community and resources and knowledge quicker. And literally what we've seen is a 90% reduction in depression.
Wow.
Probably the number one thing that shocked everybody was the lack of confidence. And I was shocked by it myself. Thinking back when I became widowed, I went, why can I not make decisions? I ran a business. I ran a household. I had no confidence, and I had no idea where it went. But I think I was so overwhelmed
Brain fog.
and brain fog that I was not thinking clearly. I couldn't think.
Yeah, well,
clearly.
how could you be confident if you can't think clearly? So
Right.
if your confidence
building
is
a
from
woman's
being
confidence
crisp.
is very important in our organization. And the way we do that is we let them know that they're the subject matter expert of their own experience. One of the tools that we have here is something called a widow empowerment quiz. We created this quiz with a widow, a young widow who is just got her PhD, but she's a mental health therapist. Everything we do at MWC is actually someone who has had the widowed experience, who is a doctor or a lawyer or a dietitian. Everything is what we call peer professionally featured. So everything we talk about is from someone who actually knows the widowed experience, but also has a profession. So I've learned so much from these doctors. We have women who are in 20s and 30s years old where widowhood caused them to go into menopause because of stress, because the hormones are so impacted. You know all about that. But what's happening is there's an industry that doesn't understand widowhood because there's not enough research done. Women aren't included in the women's health. You look at Melinda Gates, who just gave $1 billion to women's health. Well, where those money went, there's not one widow organization that's included. And so I personally feel like if we can solve some of the health crises for widowed women, it'll apply to other women, right? But we're not reaching the highest stress level women and catching it in time, because we have had women who have taken their lives. We do have women who pass away from heart problems and autoimmune. And then we see young people, kids, becoming caregivers because now they're only adult in the families are unable to keep a job.
Yeah, so it affects them and then they get sick.
Yes.
It's like a trickle down effect.
Right.
There's something similar here to, like, I remember going to Capitol Hill years ago on behalf of diabetes, and all of the organizations, we were trying to basically say if we all came together, we would be able to figure out things so much faster, because diabetes affects so many different touch points health wise. And yet, if you don't all get on the same page, then, resources are being split in ways that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I can see why you're saying that, like,
Yeah.
autoimmune diseases should be teaming up with you. Heart diseases should be teaming up with you. All of them should be working with you, because your inciting incident is what's getting them there.
That's right. And what most people don't realize is that we have 14 million widows in the United States. There's actually 300 million widows worldwide, caring for 600 million fatherless kids.
Wow.
I focus mainly on the US, but I also keep an eye on what's happening worldwide. But the world is actually waiting for the US to make these shifts. One of the things we want, of course, is a national Widows and Widowers Awareness Day to coincide with International Widows Day with the UN. But I want to go back to that widow empowerment quiz, because that quiz empowers these women to answer the questions honestly, and then they decide where they're falling in 4 categories: hope, heal, grow, and lead. Because widows come to us in all those different stages. We can't simply just talk about the grief. We have to talk about how do we move someone from the grief to the growth, because that actually can feel the same in the body. It's like distress and eustress can feel the same. Distress is truly in distress. Eustress is I'm challenging myself to do something new. I'm causing it. Distress is I'm not causing it. It's happening to me. And so the empowerment process was so key, because that's all I wanted was resources that would empower me. I'm a smart woman. I've worn, I have a lot of titles, and I wanted to do widowhood well. And then even in widowhood, I had to decide how to do life well. I had to move from doing widowhood well to doing life well. And what did that look like? And so this quiz is so powerful. It's the number one thing we ask widows to do. Where are you starting? Where are you beginning? Hope, heal, grow, lead. And then we have resources in all of those different areas. We've developed them with other widows. And we talk about all the things that you talk about, these pillars of healthy widowhood: emotional, mental health, physical health, financial health, relational health, spiritual health, fun and creativity. Widows forget to have fun. And then purpose and meaning. It's all of those at the same time. So if you're in heal and you're new, we're giving you resources that are relevant for that stage. If you're in heal, we give you more advanced, grow, more advanced. And then a lot of our ladies become leaders and advocates, whether that's in the community or coming and becoming an ambassador, sharing the things that I have learned about our research. It all got built because women wanted it. They asked for what's the next level, to the point where, now I'm a spokesperson for International Widows Day in the United States. I I didn't know we didn't have one.
We have every
Until
other day, so we might as well have that.
every other day, yes. But I didn't realize that widow advocacy was not respected as a platform.
Yeah.
And yet I realize now that we kind of fall into the inclusion area. We fall into gender equality, and it's a full deck for those causes. And so we're presenting a new cause and asking to have recognition like domestic violence did, like human trafficking did. We want to be recognized by the Department of Health and Human Services in DC. We want an office on widowed persons is what we want. There isn't one. I thought we would have a better chance of getting some attention on that after the pandemic, because if we have another pandemic sometime in the future, we could be better prepared on addressing widowed persons in this country. And it's possible. We have the experts to do it. We need to develop more research. We're actually doing a research project right now, a sociology project with the University of Denmark. And so we go where the people are interested in doing that, and we use our community because our ladies want to answer real questions.
Yeah.
And they want to share what they know and advance really the movement for widow care. That's what we've become. We started out as a small club, and now we've turned into a movement where, because when you empower women, they want to do something with it.
So true. All right, friends, that is the end of part one. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking more about the health crisis affecting widows, what that really looks like, the difference between pain and suffering, and what insurances you need to be considering, what preparation you need to be doing, what documents you need to have. So tune in tomorrow for that and more. In the meantime, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.